Munich, April 1943. Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer SS, stands before a room full of his officers, calmly explaining the systematic murder of children as a moral duty. This man, who looked like a bank clerk and fainted at his own executions, had just ordered the deaths of millions. How did a failed chicken farmer become the architect of the Holocaust? Why did Hitler trust this unremarkable bureaucrat with the darkest secrets of the Reich? And what drove a man who collected ancient Germanic artifacts to orchestrate industrial-scale genocide? I've spent years researching Himmler's psychological profile, and the contradictions will disturb you more than you expect. Let's start with something most people don't know. Heinrich Himmler wasn't born a monster. He came from a respectable Catholic family in Munich. His father was a schoolmaster, strict but loving. Young Heinrich was actually a mama's boy. Sickly, bookish, kept detailed diaries about his bowel movements and romantic fantasies. This is the kid who would grow up to systemize mass murder like a filing system. But here's where the psychology gets interesting. Himmler desperately wanted to be a soldier in World War I. He trained as an officer cadet, polished his boots, practiced marching. The war ended before he could see combat. That rejection, that sense of missing out on the great test of German manhood, ate at him for the rest of his life. He'd spent decades overcompensating for never hearing a shot fired in anger. After the war, Himmler tried farming chickens. Yes, the future head of the SS was literally a chicken farmer, and he was terrible at it. His birds kept dying, his crops failed. He was broke, bitter, and looking for someone to blame. That's when he discovered the Nazi Party in 1923. Hitler's message hit him like a revelation. Germany's problems weren't his fault. They were the fault of Jews, communists, and racial degenerates poisoning the pure German bloodline. When Himmler first met Hitler, he was nobody. Just another angry young man in the crowd. But he had something Hitler valued more than charisma or intelligence: absolute, unquestioning loyalty. While other Nazi leaders had egos, personal agendas, and private doubts, Himmler truly believed. He took notes during Hitler's speeches like a student cramming for finals. He quoted Nazi racial theory chapter and verse. Hitler recognized a perfect instrument when he saw one. In 1929, Hitler made Himmler head of the SS. At that point, the SS was basically Hitler's personal security detail, barely 300 men. The real power was with the SA, the brown shirts, who had hundreds of thousands of thugs in their ranks. But Himmler saw opportunity where others saw limitation. He began recruiting differently. Instead of street brawlers, he wanted cold, disciplined fanatics. Men who would follow orders without question, no matter how extreme. Himmler had this bizarre obsession with racial purity that went beyond even Hitler's standards. He measured SS recruits' skulls with calipers. He traced their genealogy back centuries, looking for Jewish ancestors. He created breeding programs like he was raising prize livestock. The man who failed at chicken farming was now trying to breed a master race. Here's where it gets truly dark. When Hitler came to power in 1933, Himmler moved fast. He established Dachau, the first concentration camp, as a training ground for his SS guards. But this wasn't just about political prisoners yet. Himmler was experimenting, testing how far ordinary men could be pushed to commit atrocities. He discovered something terrifying. With the right combination of ideology, peer pressure, and bureaucratic distance, almost anyone could become a killer. By 1936, Himmler controlled all German police forces. Think about what that means. The local cop in Munich, the detective in Berlin, the border guard in Bavaria, they all answered to him. He'd created a parallel state within the state, accountable only to Hitler. And unlike the army, which still had some traditional honor codes, Himmler's SS was bound by a new morality where mass murder became a sacred duty. But here's the thing that really reveals his psychology. Himmler rarely witnessed executions personally. When he did attend, he felt sick, sometimes vomited or fainted. Yet he continued ordering them by the millions. This wasn't sadistic pleasure. This was something more chilling, bureaucratic evil. He genuinely believed he was saving civilization by destroying what he called subhuman populations. The statistics are staggering. Under Himmler's direct command, the SS murdered approximately 6 million Jews, 3 million Soviet prisoners of war, hundreds of thousands of Roma, disabled individuals, and political prisoners. But Himmler didn't see numbers. He saw a messianic mission. He told his officers they were writing a glorious page of history that could never be publicly acknowledged. Let's talk about his speeches to SS commanders, because they reveal his twisted mindset. In October 1943, Himmler addressed his top officers about what he called the evacuation of the Jews. He didn't use euphemisms like other Nazis. He was brutally direct. Most of you know what it means when 100 corpses are lying side by side, or 500, or 1,000. To have stuck it out and remained decent, that is what has made us hard. He was proud of their ability to commit genocide, while maintaining what he called their moral integrity. This is where Himmler's psychology gets really disturbing. He wasn't a sadist getting pleasure from suffering. He was a true believer who had convinced himself that mass murder was a moral obligation. He compared the Holocaust to a surgeon removing a cancer, necessary, painful, but ultimately healing for the German body politic. Meanwhile, Himmler was building his personal empire. By 1944, he controlled not just the SS and police, but economic enterprises using slave labor, research institutions conducting medical experiments, and entire military divisions fighting on multiple fronts. He was probably the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany, commanding millions of personnel and controlling a budget that dwarfed most countries' entire economies. But power bred paranoia. Himmler began seeing enemies everywhere. He tapped phones, read private mail, and maintained detailed files on every Nazi leader, including Hitler himself. His agents were watching other agents. The man who had been absolutely loyal to Hitler was now positioning himself as potentially Hitler's successor. Then came 1945, and everything collapsed faster than Himmler could comprehend. Their allies were approaching from both east and west. The concentration camps were being liberated, revealing the full horror of his crimes to the world. Hitler was trapped in his Berlin bunker, increasingly erratic and detached from reality. This is when Himmler made his fatal mistake. In April 1945, he secretly contacted the Allies through Swedish intermediaries, offering to negotiate Germany's surrender. He apparently believed he could present himself as a reasonable alternative to Hitler, someone the Allies could work with in post-war Germany. The delusion is staggering. The architect of genocide thought he could simply switch sides and be welcomed as a partner. When Hitler learned of Himmler's betrayal on April 28th, his rage was volcanic. This was the man he had trusted absolutely for over 15 years, the one person he thought would never betray him. Hitler stripped Himmler of all ranks and positions, ordering his arrest as a traitor. In the bizarre logic of the collapsing Reich, the head of the SS became an outlaw of his own state. Himmler spent his final weeks wandering Germany in disguise, sometimes wearing an eye patch, carrying forged papers, identifying him as a dismissed schoolteacher. The man who had once commanded millions was reduced to hiding in farmhouses and begging rides from truck drivers. His grand delusions of negotiating with the Allies collapsed when they made clear they considered him a war criminal, not a potential partner. On May 21st, 1945, British forces captured Himmler at a checkpoint. Even then, he maintained his bizarre sense of dignity. He identified himself to his captors, apparently expecting to be treated as a legitimate head of government. Instead, they stripped him naked, searching for hidden weapons or poison. That night, during a medical examination, Himmler bit down on a cyanide capsule hidden in his mouth and died within minutes. His last words were reportedly a complaint about the rough treatment he was receiving. No remorse for his victims, no acknowledgement of his crimes, just petulant anger that he wasn't being shown proper respect. Even in death, Himmler remained the same self-righteous bureaucrat who had rationalized genocide as a moral crusade. So Heinrich Himmler cheated the gallows, just like his master Hitler. In the end, the failed chicken farmer who became history's most systematic killer died as he had lived. Convinced of his own righteousness, blind to the evil he had unleashed, and utterly incapable of seeing his victims as human beings worthy of life.